Hello and welcome back to my studio. It's Lois here from Lois and Morgana Davidson Art, and today I'm going to be sharing with you how I painted this beautiful windswept hawthorn tree. It's painted in two stages, first with Indian ink using a wet in wet technique, and then once that's completely dry, painting over it with watercolour. There's a full real-time tutorial complete with reference photographs, etc, over on my Patreon page, so follow the link below if you're interested in seeing how to do this as a step-by-step with full narration. But first, a quick peep at my new book, Landscapes in Watercolour, Tips and Techniques for the Complete Beginner, which is now available to order or pre-order, depending on where in the world you are and which shop you choose. I'm using this photograph from Pixabay as inspiration. I have edited this and cropped it, and the original version will be available on my Patreon page. But as I say, I'm just using this for inspiration. I won't be trying to paint or draw it exactly, but being inspired by the general directionality of the branches and the tree trunk, and trying to sort of get the same kind of expressive windswept atmosphere. I'm using my glass dip pen, but any dip pen will work for this, and I'm using Indian ink. It's waterproof ink, but it's only waterproof once it's dry, so I should be working into it with a water spray to try and get some interesting effects. I'm using Saunders Waterford hot press watercolour paper. It's taped to my board, and my board's at an angle of about 20 degrees. And so I'm using my dip pen, dipping in and out of the Indian ink and being guided by the photograph and positioning my trunk and my branches to start with. I'll then switch to a small paintbrush to paint in the thicker trunks and branches, and then swap between the brush and the dip pen to continue painting in this hawthorn tree with its tangle of branches, and I'll use the same methods for putting in a little bit of land. As I go, I shall use a water spray, just gently sprayed onto the damp ink, which will push the ink out into the damp parts of paper and give me some really pretty little patterns. So I've just about finished with the line drawing and this wet in wet part. Just before the ink dries, I can use a paper towel or a tissue just to dab out any darker areas, adding a little bit of extra texture and lightening the value in places. And I'm really pleased with the way this line work has turned out. I like with this method that you end up with lots of different marks. You end up with your beautifully crisp wet on dry marks and the very delicate and interesting wet in wet diffusions and little sort of suggestions of branches. So you can either leave a painting like this as it is, just as an ink painting, or you can, of course, wait for it to dry completely and then paint in a sky and a land plane. It could be any colour that you want. This sort of silhouetted tree would look beautiful against a sunset or a sunrise. I'm using turquoise and viridian and very loose brush strokes to paint this. I shall use a water spray and allow gravity to help me with the painting. If you want the full tutorial for this sky wash, then follow the link to Patreon. So here's the finished ink and watercolour painting. I've removed the tape and you can see it with a clean white border, which allows us to see it with fresh eyes. And I really like the very loose washes of sky and land behind this more structured but still very loose hawthorn tree. The Indian ink drawn and painted wet in this way as a first stage, I think is really effective. And of course you can use your imagination and do many different things using this technique. You could do it with different coloured inks. For example, maybe a sepia ink or something. I think it's best to check and make sure that your ink is waterproof to start with, because while the ink is wet on the page, you can spray it and move it around and get these lovely effects. But then as soon as it dries, it becomes waterproof. And of course, you can then paint over the top of it with your watercolour washes and create some beautiful scenes. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching this workshop, and I hope you'll give something like this a go. And of course, follow the link below if you're interested in the Patreon workshops. Please leave us a like if you enjoyed this video, and I'd love to hear what you think of it and whether you'd like to see more like this. And thank you so much to everyone that supports our channel on Patreon. We really do appreciate you. I'll see you again soon. Take care and happy painting. Bye.